A grown man slapped a 10-year-old boy mid-flight. What happened next silenced the entire plane. There are moments in life that stick with you forever. For Jalen Brooks, that moment started somewhere over Missouri at 34,000 feet, cruising in a silver tube headed from Colorado Springs to Atlanta. It was his first time flying, 10 years old, wide-eyed, wearing a navy blue hoodie that said "Future Astronaut" across the chest, because that's what he wanted to be someday. His small hands clutched the armrests when the plane took off. He wasn't scared, just excited, nervous in that kid way where everything feels big and new. Beside him sat his grandmother, Loretta Brooks, who insisted on wearing her Sunday church hat even though it kept bumping the overhead bin. She had packed their snacks, their little bottle of lotion, a couple of crossword puzzles folded into her Bible. Everything neat, everything in order. She was the kind of woman who knew every gospel song by heart and didn't raise her voice unless she meant business. They were flying to see Jalen's aunt in Georgia, Loretta's daughter, who just had her third baby. It was supposed to be a joyful trip, something to tell the cousins about later. But things don't always go the way they're supposed to. Jalen had the window seat, his cheek practically pressed against the glass. Every now and then, he'd turn around to point something out to Loretta. A cloud shaped like a dinosaur. A tiny town that looked like it was made of Legos. 3 rows up, in seat 13A, sat Walter Granger. Late 50s, ruddy face, short gray hair, and an expression that made it clear he wasn't too thrilled about sharing airspace with a plane full of strangers. He had that kind of permanent scowl people get from years of being mad at the world. Khaki pants, loafers, a crossword puzzle of his own on the tray table. But his wasn't for fun. It was to avoid eye contact. He had already grunted at the flight attendant when she didn't bring his ginger ale fast enough. Jalen didn't notice him at first. He had more important things to worry about, like how clouds looked like cotton candy or how to ask for peanuts without sounding scared. Loretta reached over and adjusted his seatbelt, then tucked a tiny bottle of hand sanitizer into the seat pocket. "Just in case," she said with a wink. Jalen smiled. He liked sitting next to Grandma. She made the world feel smaller, safer, but he still fidgeted. Kids do that. He reached into his backpack for his headphones and his elbow tapped the back of Walter Granger's seat. It wasn't hard, just a bump. The kind that happens dozens of times a day on crowded planes. Jalen didn't even realize he'd done it at first, but Walter felt it. He slowly turned his head, glared back. His eyes landed on Jalen. Jalen looked up, confused. "Sorry," he mumbled. Walter didn't say anything, just faced forward again. Loretta noticed. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but for a few more minutes, things stayed quiet. Peaceful even. The plane hummed along, cutting through the sky. But the quiet wasn't going to last. Something ugly was coming, and no one on board was ready for it. It happened fast. Jalen was reaching again, this time to plug in his headphones. The jack was awkward to find, buried between the seat cushion and the wall. He shifted. His knee nudged the tray table in front of him. Just a soft tap. But Walter Granger turned like someone had stabbed him. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked, twisting around in his seat. His voice cut through the drone of the engines. Sharp, angry. Jalen froze, eyes wide, hands midair. I didn't mean to," he said, barely above a whisper. "Don't lie to me, boy," Walter snapped. "You kicked my damn seat twice now. Sit still and act like you've been taught some manners." Loretta leaned forward fast, her fingers gripping the armrest between them. "Sir," she said, voice firm but controlled. "He's a child. He said he's sorry. There's no need for that tone." Walter didn't even look at her. He was still locked on Jalen. Then he did something no one on that plane saw coming. He reached back and slapped Jalen across the face. The sound wasn't loud, but it was sharp. A flat smack against skin. Jalen jerked to the side, stunned. Loretta gasped. "Oh my God!" The whole row behind them and the one ahead snapped to attention. A woman across the aisle let out a "Did he just?" and then silence. Not the quiet kind, but the heavy, paralyzing kind. The kind that makes time feel slow. Jalen clutched his cheek. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He wasn't crying. Not yet. But his body had gone stiff, like his brain was still trying to figure out if that really just happened. Loretta's voice came out tight and shaking. "You put your hands on my grandson?" Walter finally turned to face her. Maybe if you taught him to keep his limbs to himself, I wouldn't have had to, he said, casually, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Loretta stood up so fast her knees hit the seat in front of her. You touch him again, and I swear to God. Walter raised his hands in mock defense. Oh, here we go, he said. Of course. Gonna play the victim now. Typical. A man 2 rows up, twisted around, eyes wide. A younger woman in the back fumbled with her phone, camera app already open. People were waking up. The atmosphere had changed. You could feel it in the air. Tight, confused, electric. The flight attendant on duty, Monica Reyes, rushed over from the galley. She looked maybe 30, brown curls pinned back under her navy cap. Sir, what happened? She asked. He hit my grandson, Loretta snapped. Right in front of me. Monica looked between Jalen and Walter, then back again. Is that true, sir? Walter leaned back in his seat and shrugged. The kid was kicking me. He needed to be taught some respect. He's 10, Loretta shouted. You don't lay hands on a child. You don't put your hands on anybody. Jalen still hadn't said anything. He just stared at the seat in front of him, his hands balled into fists in his lap. Monica glanced around. Passengers were whispering. Phones were up. One man leaned over the aisle, eyes narrowed at Walter. The whole plane was watching now. Ma'am, sir, I need you both to remain calm, Monica said carefully. Let's not escalate this. Too late for that, Loretta hissed. Jalen finally turned to his grandmother. Grandma, he whispered, his voice shaky. I just wanted to plug in my headphones. She knelt beside him, brushing his cheek with her thumb. I know, baby. I know. Monica took a step back, pressing the button on the intercom phone to call the front. But before anyone could figure out what to do, a calm, steady voice came from 4 rows back, and everything changed. I saw the whole thing. The voice wasn't loud, but it carried, strong, steady, and sure. Heads turned as a man in a charcoal blazer stood up from seat 17C. His name was Dr. Lionel Mercer, mid-40s, clean-shaven, dark brown skin, slightly graying at the temples. The kind of man who spoke with intention, not loud, not aggressive, just controlled, like he measured every word before it left his mouth. I watched it happen, he continued, walking slowly up the aisle, gripping the headrests for balance. That man slapped the boy. He pointed directly at Walter. I don't care what the excuse is. What happened was assault. Walter laughed under his breath and shook his head. You weren't even close enough to know what you saw. The kid's been bouncing around like a damn ping pong ball for half the flight. Lionel ignored him. He turned to Monica, the flight attendant. I'm a trauma surgeon. I've seen worse than this, but make no mistake, what he did is illegal and dangerous. He struck a minor. No parent's going to brush that off. No grandparent should have to. Loretta looked up at Lionel, her eyes glassy with shock and gratitude. Thank you, she said quietly. Jalen peeked out from under his hoodie, eyes tracking the stranger. Lionel gave him a short nod, gentle but direct, a signal that he wasn't alone. Another flight attendant showed up, Kevin Tran, early 20s, clearly newer. He leaned toward Monica and whispered something. She nodded, then turned to Walter. Sir, we're going to have to ask you to change seats. Walter's face twisted. I'm not going anywhere. I paid for this seat. I didn't do anything wrong. The kid's been jumping all over me for an hour. Kevin gently but firmly replied, Sir, we need to de-escalate the situation. Walter leaned back and crossed his arms. I'm fine right here. From across the aisle, a woman spoke up, middle-aged, red hair and a tight bun. I saw it too, she said. The boy didn't do anything to deserve that. It was just a bump. You don't hit a kid over that. Another voice chimed in. Then another. Passengers were speaking up now, like dominoes tipping one after another. Someone whispered, This is messed up. Another said, Why isn't he being moved? And from the back, loud enough for everyone to hear, If that had been a white kid, y'all would have already tackled the guy. The tension was thick now. You could feel it. The pressure. The sense that something big was hanging in the air. Jalen pulled his knees up to his chest. Loretta was still crouched beside him, one hand on his back. Her voice was low now, almost like a prayer. Lionel didn't sit down. He stepped aside slightly, letting the crew handle it. But he wasn't done. He crossed his arms and stood where everyone could see him, a quiet presence, a witness. Kevin turned to the front of the plane. "I'm going to notify the pilot." Walter rolled his eyes. "Yeah, go tell the pilot that the kid can't sit still for 2 hours without bothering people. Let's see how far that gets you." Monica's jaw clenched, but she didn't respond. She walked up the aisle. But by the time she reached the cockpit, the situation behind her had already started spiraling out of control. Monica hadn't even made it halfway back from the cockpit before the shouting started. Walter was standing now. That got everyone's attention. He wasn't a big man, but he had a way of puffing himself up. Shoulders square, chin raised, voice projecting like he was auditioning for a courtroom drama. He jabbed a finger in Loretta's direction. "This is exactly what's wrong with this country. You raise these kids with no respect, no discipline, and when someone tries to teach them how to behave, suddenly, I'm the villain." Loretta stood too. Her voice didn't rise, but her presence filled the space. "You didn't try to teach my grandson anything," she said, low and firm. "You hit him. That's not discipline. That's assault." Jalen was still in his seat, head down. He looked small, embarrassed, angry, everything at once. He was shaking. Lionel stepped forward again. "Sir, I suggest you sit down before you make this worse for yourself." "Oh, I'm making it worse?" Walter turned to Lionel. "You people always think you know everything." Monica had just returned and heard that last part. "Enough," she said, voice sharp now. "Sir, please take your seat. The captain has been informed and authorities will meet the plane once we land." Walter laughed, loud. "So that's how it is? Everyone here's decided I'm the bad guy over a brat kicking my seat?" A teenager with box braids sitting near the back called out, "You hit a kid, bro. What do you expect?" Another passenger added, "Nobody cares about your excuses. You crossed the line." The cabin had officially turned on him. Walter's expression shifted. He looked around, eyes darting, realizing just how many people were staring at him. Phones were still up, recording, capturing every word, every movement. "Y'all are gonna ruin a man's life over this?" he asked, almost to himself now. Jalen finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but clear. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." Walter turned toward him slowly. "You annoyed me," he muttered. "Same difference." Jalen didn't respond. He just stared at the tray table in front of him. Loretta reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. That's when Lionel took another step forward, this time face to face with Walter. "I want you to hear me clearly," Lionel said. "This boy is not yours to discipline. He's not yours to correct, touch, or humiliate. You don't get to strike a child because you're uncomfortable. You don't get to rewrite what happened. We all saw it. We all heard it." Walter didn't say anything. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "Now," Lionel continued, "sit down, or you can stand here and dig your grave even deeper." A long pause. Then finally, Walter sat, slow, reluctant, breathing heavy through his nose. He turned toward the window and didn't look at anyone. The crew moved quickly after that. Kevin leaned over to Loretta and whispered, "Would it help if we moved you both to the front?" She nodded. Jalen didn't resist when she gently helped him out of the seat. As they passed, some passengers murmured, "Stay strong. We got you." And, "He's just a miserable man." Jalen kept his head down, but he felt it. That people saw him. That he wasn't invisible. That he mattered. Monica quietly placed herself between Walter and the rest of the cabin. Lionel returned to his seat, but not before making eye contact with Jalen again and giving him a small, closed-mouth smile. A silent message. "You're safe now." But as the plane dipped into its descent and the seatbelt signs came on, the real storm hadn't even hit yet. The ground was waiting, with flashing lights and questions nobody could ignore. The descent began. Everyone was buckled in, trays stowed, window shades up. But the air inside the plane felt tight, pressurized in a way that had nothing to do with altitude. Jalen sat silently next to Loretta in the front row now, his small hands gripping the edge of the seat. He didn't ask for his headphones again, didn't even glance at the window, just stared straight ahead like he was trying to disappear into the upholstery. Loretta watched him, heart aching. She'd seen a lot in her life, raised 3 boys in Tallahassee, buried one, lived through years of being overlooked, overcharged, and underestimated. But this? Watching her grandbaby get struck by a stranger in plain view of an entire plane? This was a different kind of pain. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. You didn't deserve that. Jalen didn't answer, just blinked slowly, lips pressed together. A woman across the aisle, a nurse from Oklahoma named Renee, leaned forward and gently handed Loretta a small packet of tissues. He's brave, she said softly. Loretta nodded, fighting to hold it together. Back in row 13, Walter hadn't said a word since sitting down. He kept his face turned to the window, arms folded tight across his chest. But the mutters and side eyes kept coming. Nobody forgot. Lionel sat quietly now, arms crossed, his eyes on the seat in front of him. He wasn't angry. He was focused, waiting. Kevin, the young flight attendant, returned from the cockpit. His voice was calm but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, he said into the intercom, upon landing, we ask that you remain in your seats until law enforcement boards the aircraft. Thank you. That was it. Simple. But the message was clear. Walter shifted slightly in his seat. You've got to be kidding me, he mumbled. Over this? He looked around, waiting for someone to nod in agreement. No one did. A man a few rows back, a truck driver from Kansas wearing a ball cap, murmured loud enough for others to hear. He should be lucky it wasn't my kid. Jalen turned slightly toward Loretta. Am I in trouble? He asked. The words hit her like a slap of their own. No, baby, she said, holding his hand. You did everything right. But everybody was looking. They weren't looking at you like that. They were looking at him, because what he did wasn't right, and people saw it. Jalen stared at the floor. I didn't mean to touch his seat. I know, she said gently. Some folks, they walk through this world thinking it belongs to them, like everyone else is just in the way. He finally looked up at her. Why? Loretta took a breath. Because no one ever made them feel small, so they think they get to make everybody else feel that way instead. Jalen thought about that, then nodded, slow. The plane banked gently to the left, the lights of Alabama glowing beneath them. People were quiet now, not in fear, but in anticipation. Then, through the tiny circular window by row 2, the flashing red and blue lights of airport police came into view, moving toward the gate, waiting. Walter saw them too. His jaw tightened, his breathing grew shallow. Lionel watched him, not with hate, not even anger, just patience, like he'd seen this before, too many times. But Walter wasn't the only one the police were coming for. The truth had already spread beyond that plane. And once the doors opened, this story would no longer belong to just the people on board. The wheels touched down with a soft jolt. A few people clapped. Most didn't. The mood was too thick, too uncertain. Seatbelt signs dinged. The plane began to taxi. Jalen didn't move. Loretta placed her hand on his back and whispered, It's almost over. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on the seat in front of him. The plane rolled to a stop. Then came the announcement, Monica's voice now just slightly shaky. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Authorities will board shortly. We ask for your full cooperation. Outside, 2 uniformed officers were visible through the windows, standing just beyond the jet bridge. One of them talked into a radio. Another adjusted her vest. They weren't rushing, but they weren't strolling either. Jalen shifted, finally sitting up straighter. Loretta gave his shoulder a small squeeze. Kevin and Monica stood at opposite ends of the cabin, trying to keep the aisle clear. Monica walked toward the front to open the door as the jet bridge aligned. Then it happened. Walter stood up, not aggressive, not fast, just stood, grabbed his carry-on from the overhead bin like nothing had happened, like he thought this was all a misunderstanding that would magically go away the second he got off the plane. Monica was quick. Sir, she said sharply, please sit down. Walter ignored her, took one slow step forward. Lionel stood up in response, not blocking him, just watching. You really think you're walking off this plane like nothing happened? Lionel asked. Walter scoffed. I didn't do anything. This whole plane's overreacting. Then came the knock at the door. One sharp thump. Monica pulled the handle and opened it. 2 officers stepped inside. 1 male, 1 female. Both calm, professional. The female officer spoke first. We need to speak with Mr. Walter Granger. Walter raised a hand, trying to act confused. Yeah, I'm him. What's this about? She didn't answer with words, just stepped forward and said, Sir, You're going to need to come with us." Passengers leaned into the aisle to watch. Phones up, recording. Some whispered, others just stared. Nobody looked away. Walter looked around one last time. His face started to fall. Not angry, not smug, just exposed. He glanced back at Jalen, who was finally watching him too. No tears, no fear, just quiet strength. A kind of stillness that doesn't belong to kids, but sometimes finds them anyway. Walter hesitated, then followed the officers toward the door. As he passed Lionel's row, he muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous." Lionel didn't flinch. "No, it's accountability." The officers led Walter off the plane. The door shut behind them. A few passengers exhaled loudly. One woman clapped once, but stopped herself. Monica turned toward Loretta and Jalen. "We're so sorry this happened," she said. Loretta gave a tired nod. "It's not on you, but thank you for handling it." Monica hesitated, then added, "If you'd like to file an official report, we'll walk you through it right now." Jalen finally spoke again. "Will it help stop people like him?" Monica knelt beside him, choosing her words. "I don't know if it'll stop all of them, but it makes it harder for them to keep getting away with it." Jalen looked at his grandmother. Loretta nodded. "Then we do it." But what neither of them knew was that before they even stepped off that plane, the videos were already online, and the world was already watching. The tunnel from the plane to the gate felt colder than it should have. Jalen walked slowly beside his grandmother, her hand wrapped around his, like a shield. Lionel followed a few steps behind, silent but present. Monica and Kevin stayed near, guiding them past the officers and toward the waiting area, where a Delta supervisor stood with a clipboard and a tight expression. News had moved fast. 2 people were already interviewing passengers in hushed voices. Phones were still out. A woman from row 19 was live streaming, her voice shaking with emotion. "I watched it happen. A grown man hit a child. Just hit him, like it was nothing. And people defended him at first, until the right person stood up." Security escorted Loretta and Jalen to a quieter corner of the terminal. The room smelled like coffee and carpet glue. Lionel pulled up a chair and sat across from them while they filled out the incident report. Loretta wrote slowly, carefully. Her cursive was clean and practiced, but her hand trembled just slightly. Jalen kept glancing at the officers through the window. "What do you think will happen to him?" he asked. Lionel leaned forward. "That's not for us to decide, but today, he had to face the truth, and you had to live it." Jalen frowned. "I didn't even do anything." Lionel nodded. "I know. That's the part that hurts the most." There was a pause. Then Loretta looked up, eyes red but steady. "I'm grateful you were there," she said. "Most folks would have looked away." Lionel gave a tired smile. "Truth is, I almost did. I had my headphones in. I was tired. I thought, someone else will say something. But then I saw the boy's face." He looked at Jalen. That look kids get when they start thinking it's their fault. And I just couldn't sit still anymore. Jalen didn't speak, but his eyes stayed locked on Lionel's. Something quiet passed between them. Not words, not even a feeling, just understanding. A few minutes later, an airline rep returned. "We've arranged transportation to your family's home," she said to Loretta, "and the airline will be following up directly regarding compensation." Loretta didn't care about the money. She cared that someone believed them, that someone had stepped up, that Jalen had been seen. As they got up to leave, Lionel stood too. "You take care of him," he said. "I always do," Loretta replied. They shook hands, but Jalen lingered. He looked up at Lionel and asked, "Can I be like you one day?" Lionel smiled. "You already are." Jalen gave a small grin, then walked off with his grandmother, their silhouettes shrinking as they disappeared into the hallway. Later that night, the video hit 10 million views. Comment sections lit up with outrage and support and pain. Some people tried to explain Walter's behavior away, but most weren't having it. His name started trending. A local Atlanta news station ran a headline, "Passenger removed from flight after striking child, medical doctor intervenes." Someone tracked down Dr. Lionel Mercer's credentials. He refused interviews, declined praise. He'd said what he needed to say. The world didn't need a hero. It needed more people who refused to look away. And maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes the smallest action, a hand raised in protection, a voice raised in truth, is what changes everything. Not just for the one being hurt, but for everyone who's watching. If you ever see someone being mistreated, speak up, even if your voice shakes, even if you're scared, because silence always sides with the wrong people. Be the person who stands up.